Hello guys, welcome back. So in the previous lecture, we have discussed about the selection sort, right? So let's now implement the selection sort in this video. Okay, it's also one of the basic sorting algorithms. So let's quickly implement it. Okay, so for that, like if you remember in the previous lecture, I have said what it does, it basically loops through the array and then it checks for the minimum number and with the current number. If the minimum number and the current number, like minimum number is smaller than the current number, then only it swaps the position, right? And what it does, let me zoom in. Okay, otherwise what it does, it simply once it is sorted, right, so it simply ignores the sorted element and then it iterates through the next elements, right? So let's say if these two elements are sorted, then in the next iteration it will not consider these two, it will consider these three. Okay, and then in next iteration it will consider these three, right? So now let's implement that, right? So yeah, one more thing before that, let's quickly grab the swapping logic which we have implemented in the bubble sort, right? So for me, I have these two swapping logics. If you want, you can take a screenshot, or if you want, you can write it down, right? So I'll go with this one, right? So let me just copy it. Okay, I'll go with this swapping logic, because if you remember, we are going to swap the elements, right? So let's say we have 4 and we have 3. So these two numbers are like this one is smaller than this one, right? So we have to swap their positions, right? 3 in the place of 4 and the 4 in the place of 3, right? So for that swapping, we have to do end of the day. Okay, so now let's implement the selection sort. So function selection sort. Okay, here we have to pass an array. Okay, which array will pick, or will just pick this one, right? That's not an issue. So first thing we have, what we have to do, we have to basically create a for loop. Okay, for let I equals to 0, I smaller than dot length, and then I plus plus, right? So see, it's a basic for loop, right, which will be basically iterating through the array. So we can consider it as a parent iterator, right? So it will loop through the array, right, like this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. Okay, on all the elements we are going to loop through, right? Now here is a little tricky part, which you can say it's not that much complex. See, now what we have to do, once we are looping through the parent array, right, we have to loop through the child elements as well, right? So this one, like 4 7 9 3, and then in next iteration we have to loop through like 7 9 and 4, right? That means whichever element is getting sorted, we don't have to include those elements in the iteration, right? So how we can do that? See, for that there is just a simple logic. We have to write a for loop. Okay, I'll copy this whole thing. Okay, here instead of I'll use j obviously, and here instead of 0, instead of iterating through 0th element every time, what I will do, I'll iterate through I plus 1. Okay, so this way on every iteration we will ignore the parent iteration. So let's say parent loop is in second iteration. Okay, so in the child loop we will ignore the second iteration and we will start from here. Okay, and then if the parent loop is in this third element, then we will ignore the third element and we will start a loop from the fourth and fifth element. Okay, so now to understand it better, let's quickly change it, array dot length and then j plus plus. Okay, so to quickly understand it, let's quickly log these two values. Okay, I and j, right, so that you will understand like what is going on here. Okay, so I and j, I log here, and then let's quickly call this function, or let me quickly just format it. Okay, so I'm calling this function and then let's pick this array. Okay, in this, right, now what I have to do, I have to console log it, right? Or I don't have to console log it, I think. Okay, I plus 1, j smaller than I dot length, selection sort, we are passing this. So let's see what happens. Even though we are not returning anything, So actually the value should come here, right? That is what I'm expecting, but it is not coming here somehow. So there must be something. I think I have to refresh it or what. Or let's just array only we are passing, right? So let me quickly expand it a little bit. Okay. Selection sort. Let's pass an array of 2 comma 5 comma 3 comma 6. Okay, so it's not logging these two things, right? So we have to figure out like why it is not doing that. I think there must be something which I am doing wrong. So array selection sort array dot. Okay, so this was a thing, right, guys? I wrote the spelling wrong. I spelled it wrong. So this was a thing. So I had an extra T here, right? So that was a idiotic mistake. I apologize for that. Right. So now I'm calling this function. Okay, so what will happen, like I'll get the value of I and j. Okay, so let's see that quickly. See, now I, like I, you can consider it as the parent loop, right? So parent loop is in the 0th position, so we are comparing 0 to 1, 0 to 2, 0 to 3, 0 to 4. We are not comparing 0 to 0, right? This is because in the child loop we are iterating from I plus 1, that means 0 plus 1, that will be 1, right? So we are not comparing same index every time. Okay, now the parent loop goes into the second iteration. So the second iteration will be 1. So we are comparing 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, right? Let me zoom it. Okay, so 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, right? Now the parent loop goes into the third iteration. Here what we have to do, we have to check 2 to 3, 2 to 4, and then 3 to 4, right? Now it reaches to the last element, so we are not going to compare 4 to 4, right? So this way, we from the parent loop we are just going to compare the next numbers. So let's say the parent loop is in this iteration, then we are going to compare these elements, right? If the parent loop is in this iteration, then we are going to compare these elements, okay, to find basically the minimum number, right? So that is the idea. Now see guys, we are almost there, like we have almost implemented everything in the selection sort, right? It's simple as that. Okay, so now all there is to like check is to swap the values when we get some minimum value, right? So what we can do on every iteration, let min index. Okay, so I'll create a min index. Okay, so for this I'll set it to 0 for now. Okay, or I'll set it to, what to say, I. Okay, because what will happen, like we have to consider the first element as the minimum element, right? So let's say we have 7. Okay, so since we don't know what can be the next number, so we'll consider this only as the what to say, minimum number, right? So if we have one number, then we'll consider this as a minimum. If we find any number which is smaller than the current minimum, then we will update the minimum. Okay, so that is the idea, right? So now I have to write an if condition. So if array at position min, I think it's min index, right? Min index is greater than array at position j, right? Because in the child loop only we are going to find the next numbers, right? So if array at position min is greater than array at position j, so we have set the current minimum. Okay, if it is greater than the like the number which we found through while looping through the array, then what we have to simply do, we simply have to update the min index to the new index which we found, right? So it is something like this. So min index found, which is j, right? And then array at position j, so that we can clearly see what's happening, right? Max index is, or I wrote index twice, right? Is, and then here we have to pass min index like this, or we can say current min indexes, right? So this way it will be much easier. So here we have to pass min index and array at position min index. Okay, so let me quickly format it a little bit because it was looking a little ugly, right? So now let's zoom out a little bit. Okay, so now if you see the console, see, we found a minimum which was like 1, right? Okay, minimum was, its index was basically 1, and then that element in that particular position was 4. Okay, so current index was 0 and then current minimum was 7. So we found these two numbers. Okay, so what we will do, we will simply update the index, the current minimum index, which is this one, right, from to the new index which we found by looping through the array, right? So basically this one. So here we found like on this particular index on position 1, there is a number which is smaller than on our current minimum index, right? So we will simply update the current minimum index from 0 to 1, right? Okay, now um, okay, now we are looping through the array again. Min index is 2, and then what to say, the element at min index is 2, right? So again we found a min index which is what to say, which is at position 2, right? At position 2 we found a number which is again smaller than our current minimum index. So since we have updated the current minimum index to 1, so what it will do, it will compare 2 from 4, right? Because 4 it at position 1, if you see here, okay, and 2 is at position 2, right? So that is why it will compare 2 with 4. So 2 is smaller than 4, then what will happen, again we are updating the min index. Let me quickly shrink it a little bit so you guys can see the code as well parallelly, right? So this much will be fine, right? Okay, so you can see the code parallelly. See, so here is the code. Okay, so if we are getting any index which is smaller than our current min index, okay, so which is basically this. So if array at position j is smaller than array at position min index, then only we are going to update the min index to j. Okay, so in simple words, we are simply saying if there is any smaller element, just replace the current element with the smaller element. Okay, otherwise don't do anything. So this is about finding the minimum number in the array, right? So now what we have to do, we have to swap the elements, right? So in selection sort, what happens, let's say we have the minimum number is this, okay, and then maximum number is this. So what should be the next thing we should do, we have to swap 7 with 2, right? Like this is the one which we have to do now, right? So where we have to do it, we simply have to do it outside of the inner for loop. So in the inner for loop, like the child for loop, we will be checking like all the elements to make sure there is no other smaller element left, and then in the parent loop, once this whole loop finishes, then we will simply swap those elements. Okay, swap, or I think it was swap old, right? I think swap old was the one. Okay, so it was swap old. Now here we have to pass our array, and then we have to pass the min index, which is min index, and then we have to pass, okay, we have to pass the current index, right? So current index will be the parent loop's index, right? And then we have to pass the min index, right? So this was the thing. So here what we are basically doing, so let's say if parent loop is in this iteration, so the current index or the parent loop's index will be this, right? I will be 0, right? And then in the child loop we found out some elements which we are updating in the min index. Okay, so min index, let's say, is 2, right? So we will be swapping parent index, which is I, with the min index, which is 2. So then only we'll get something like this, right? So now let's quickly see the result of it. Okay, so if you want, you can take a look at it, you can take a screenshot, or you can write it down. You understand it, then let's just jump into the log to see how it works. Okay, so now let me quickly comment this out, and let's quickly comment all the console logs because I don't want any confusion here, at least for now, right? Then I'll enable it. That's not a big issue. Okay, so yeah, now what I have to do is I simply have to return the array at the end, right? Return array. So after swapping, we will be returning the array. So let's see that how it goes. Okay, okay. So now if you see what I am getting here is 2, 3, 4, 7, 9. That means our array is totally sorted, right? So what happens here is you guys will think like this is a final solution, right? But I'll show you a little problem here like in a few minutes. Okay, let's try to understand first what happened here. So let's quickly enable the logs, or let's just remove these logs. Okay, so let's see first like where the swapping is happening, right? So swapping here, and then let's just pass all these three things before swapping here. Okay, and then let's pass after swapping, we'll pass the same thing. Okay, so this way we can see like what is before swapping and what is after swapping. Okay, so let's now quickly see how it goes. Let me quickly stretch it a little bit. See, before swapping our array was 74293. Fine, the current index was 0 because we are looping through the parent array. Okay, and then the child loop index was 2. Okay, so let me quickly write it, right? Parent loop index, which is I, and then min min index. Okay, so the same thing I'll copy and paste here as well. Here, right? It will be fine. I paste it somewhere else, right? So now we will see everything clearly, what is value and where it is coming from. Okay, see, before swapping the array, we had this array. The parent loop index was 0 and the min index was 2. Okay, because this is the element which we found in the parent iteration. Okay, then we swapped it. So what happens then? 2 came at the place of 7 and 7 came at the place of 2 because we are simply swapping it, right? So the index will be same, right? Now in the second iteration, okay, so in second iteration the parent loop index will be 1, right? And then here we found the element which is smaller than the number which is at position 1, which is 4. Okay, so if you see here there is no element which is smaller than number 4. Okay, so nothing happens, but still we are swapping the elements. That means we are swapping 4 with the 4. If you see after swapping we are getting 4, right? So this is the small issue which I was talking about. Okay, so if there is no other element, let's say you have set an element which is minimum. Okay, and then you didn't found any other element which is minimum than the current number. So what is happening right now? We are swapping the minimum element with the minimum element. Okay, that is not what we want, right? If the value is same or if the index is same, we have to simply skip it, right? So that is just one small edge case we will add in a minute. Okay, so let's try to understand like what happened next. Okay, after swapping we are getting 2 3 what to say, after swapping. Okay, so here is an issue right now, right? So again we are doing the swapping. See, 4 went like ideally it should not go, or wait guys. See, in the 4, like with 4 we got an element which is smaller than 4, right? So we have swapped their numbers. Okay, now so the issue which I was talking about which didn't came yet, so we'll see in a minute, right, where it will come. Okay, so 2 3 7 9 4. Now our current index, like parent index, is 7, right? And then from here we are going to loop through it. So the minimum index is 0 1 2 3 4 right now. So we will swap these two numbers. So right now 2 3 4 9 7, and then 2, 3, 4, 9, 7. Here what we are doing, our current index is 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, which is this one, and then we are checking this one and this one. Okay, so 7 is obviously smaller than 9. Then we are swapping their positions, and now we are the parent index is 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, right? So now the parent loop index and the like minimum index is 4, right? So this is the issue which I was talking about here. Actually, whatever I said, just forget that, because it was working the way we want it to work, right? Here only the issue which I was saying, like if we have the same index in parent index also we have the same number, and in child index or minimum index also we have the same number, right? If we have same number in both the places, then why we need to swap, right? But if you see here, it is still swapping. See, fourth index we are swapping with the fourth index, right? And that is not what we want, right? So this is basically an extra step, right? So it is again swapping it, and then it is giving us the end result. Okay, so let's quickly handle this as well. So for that, there is nothing much we have to do. Let's quickly comment this and this as well for timing. Okay, so what we have to do, if I is not equals to min index, it's simple as that. Okay, so if I is not equals to min index, then only we have to swap the elements. Okay, otherwise we don't have to swap the elements. Okay, that's a simple thing. So now let's quickly see the logs again of the last element, whether we are getting again an extra log or not. Okay, oh sorry. So before swapping and after swapping, okay, because this is because I've added it outside of the if condition, so that is not actually what we want. So inside the if condition only I'm adding these logs, right? So now let's see how it goes. See, right now what is happening, we are comparing 0 to 2, 0 to 2, that is fine. Then we are comparing the current index is 1, and then minimum index is 4. Then we are swapping it. After swapping we are getting this thing, and then again we are coming to swapping where the parent index is 2 and the min index is 4, and then after swapping we are getting something like this. Okay, so now we have the parent index as 3 and then minimum index as 4, so we are swapping it. Okay, but now there is no such log which says like parent index is 4 and then minimum index is 4. Okay, so now what we have done is we are simply skipping if the indexes are same. Okay, so that means if we are trying to compare this number with this number, okay, in parent loop we'll get this number, but in child loop also we'll get this number. Okay, then we are simply going to ignore it. Okay, because if you see here, for the min index, whatever we are getting in the parent index, right, we are setting it, right? So if the min index is same as the parent loop's index, right, so it is actually basically originating from here only, right? If the parent loop is in this iteration and the min index is this, okay, so we are simply not going to swap it. So this is the basically condition. Okay, so yeah, this is it for like what to say, selection sort. So let's talk a little bit about the time complexity of the selection sort, right? So let me quickly comment this out, what I just did. Okay, so let's talk about the like complexity of this selection sort. So time complexity wise, or we can say complexity wise, it's not that much efficient. It's like O of n square. But why we use it, in case if you are worried about the space complexity? Okay, because with the help of selection sort you can save space, right? So it like swaps the elements in places. Okay, we don't have to create a new element, we don't have to create a new variable to store that element, and then we have to do something, right? So it replaces or swaps the element in place. Okay, unlike bubble sort, right? So that is why like it is efficient in terms of like space complexity, in terms of like occupying memory, but in terms of time complexity it's O of n square, because we are simply looping inside like looping through the array multiple times, right? We have loop inside of another loop. Okay, that is why its time complexity is O of n square. Okay, so I'll write the complexity here. Complexity O of, or it should be big O, right? Big O of n square. So this is the like complex time complexity of selection sort, and this is what selection sort is. Okay, so yeah, this is it for this lecture. By the way, I'll attach the snippet in the description. If you want to get this snippet, you can get it from the description. Okay, so this is it for this lecture. There is one more basic selection, like what to say, search sorting algorithm which we have to see. So let's see that in the next lecture. Okay, so see you there.